Okay, people, so welcome back to the channel. This is Peak Fiction. I'm your humble host, Mello, joined by It's Meek. Say what's up.
Yo, what's good? How's everybody doing?
Yo, and we're going to be covering Boruto Chapter 3. It just dropped. We're going to be going over the pacing and structure, some talk about the characters. We're going to cover the story and give our general thoughts and maybe some predictions about what's going to happen in Chapter 4. Just a brief little recap. The story of Two Blue Vortex, the chapter picks right back off where Chapter 2 left off. And we see that Boruto starting his battle with Code, and we see the new Rasengan. It's called the Uzuhiko, as we learned last chapter. The effects of the jutsu are felt by Damon, which is super interesting, but not by Ada. Now, going further beyond that, Code suffers the effect of the new jutsu, and Boruto explains it, not in detail, but just a little bit, to Code. Now, Boruto tries to make a deal with Code, but Kawaki and the side characters intervene. Now, from here, Code uses the distraction to escape, attacks Kawaki with a claw grime, and elsewhere we see Sarada doing some analysis, and she's trying to figure out exactly how the claw grimes kind of function based upon how they attack other people and become trees. And just to wrap up this recap of the story, Boruto and Kawaki speak for a little while, but at the same time, Boruto is still focused on his true goal, the Ten Tails. Now, he places a tracker on Code, which is super surprising because the tracker turns out to be a toad that looks very similar to that of the toads used by one Kashi Koji. Hell of a cliffhanger. The chapter ends and it looks like Boruto's using a hand sign and potentially heading the way of Code in the Ten Tails dimension. So just a little recap of the story there, just so everyone's on the same page. Did you want to add anything to that, Meek, or did you have any thoughts about that?
No, I think you recapped it perfectly. The events of this chapter mostly was about Boruto flexing his Rasengan Uzuhiko on Code, as that was something that everyone was looking forward to when it comes to Chapter 3. At the end of Chapter 2, we saw Boruto whip out this jutsu, and in Chapter 3, we saw how Boruto implemented it on somebody like Code. We should talk about the pacing now of this chapter, as most of this chapter was focused on Boruto implementing this jutsu, as once we saw Boruto awaken it, Code immediately was like Rasengan Uzuhiko, and he was questioning if this was Boruto's vanishing Rasengan or a completely new jutsu. And even though Code deduces that this isn't the vanishing Rasengan, he immediately goes for the kill by trying to ambush Boruto from behind and going for the swipe. However, I do gotta give some praise to Ikimoto. He did a great job of showing the perspective of Boruto implementing the Rasengan Uzuhiko onto Code. I really enjoyed this because we saw the perspective shots from above, from the side, and honestly, it just showed you the power difference between Boruto and Code. Code immediately goes into his karma form after Boruto blocks one of his attacks, and Boruto is just unfazed, which is kind of crazy considering that just 2 years ago, at least what was implied from the text, when Code and Boruto were talking last chapter, it does seem like Code did beat up Boruto in a fight that we have not seen yet during the 3-year time skip. That being said, Boruto must have gone through a crazy training arc to get that much more powerful, to the point where he can basically dominate Karma no limiter Code just in his base form. No karma is needed. He doesn't need Momoshiki. He's in his base form fighting a Jigen level plus threat with a karma on top with absolute ease, right? Blocking Code's attacks with his katana, and then finally giving his Rasengan Uzuhiko to Code. And we find out with Boruto's explanation on how it works, it essentially, just to give it in layman terms, Code essentially just gets vertigo, right? This jutsu is described on a planetary level, where Boruto incorporates the planet's chakra, aka its rotation, and it is spinning through Code's body. And this is where Code is feeling the after effects of the entire planet, where, as you said, Mello, even somebody like Damon could feel the ground trembling, where we even know somebody like Damon right now is the strongest character in the series, not named Shibuya Otsutsuki. Right now, amongst all of the alive characters, Damon is number one. And for him to be impressed shows you just how powerful this jutsu is. And Code, he immediately feels the after effects, where if you want to compare it to a real life situation, think of like boxing, right? Boruto and Code are fighting each other in a ring, and Boruto immediately goes for the knockout punch, which puts Code on his heels, aka the Rasengan Uzuhiko, which makes Code immediately fall to the ground. He can't stand straight and his equilibrium is gone. And I do want to point out that Ikimoto did a good job of showing how powerful it is, since there was many perspective shots that were shown from Code's POV when looking at Boruto as Boruto was explaining the jutsu, where whenever Code saw Boruto was not standing straight. He was to the side or even upside down, which shows you that Code right now has permanent vertigo. He can't stand straight. He's always dizzy. And Boruto even gave Code an option to rescind the Uzuhiko from him by telling him where the 10 tails is at, since we know that Boruto's main objective is to eliminate the main body. It has been stated in the past couple of chapters that Boruto is more focused on the 10 tails rather than Code, and showing the power difference between these characters, it should tell you that Code is nowhere near the power level that he really thought he was, as even though he did beat him a couple years ago during the time skip, Boruto is now on a completely different level. And just before Code answers Boruto, after Boruto warns Code to tell him where the 10 tails is, Kawaki comes in and now Code has escaped.
You pretty much hit the nail on the head when we're talking about like the pacing and the structure of the chapter. I gotta say, like that moment just sparked a memory in my mind when you brought up how he like pulled out the sword and blocked the attack. Like the fight choreography in general was super dope, and we can definitely give Ikimoto his flowers there, because I was liking it. The pacing was fast, and I think that's something that he's been doing really well since the very beginning of Two Blue Vortex, right? All three chapters so far as of the recording of this video. The pacing has been going by super fast. We start off where we don't really see Boruto. He shows up like Goku from Dragon Ball making this grand entrance, and then the war, this like not war but like this invasion on Konoha kind of just breaks out, and it's chaos and it's insane. And now we get Boruto with this brand new like rotation and planetary chakra and this Uzuhiko thing that has been explained, but it's still super mysterious. And again, like the moment where like Code attacks and Boruto dodges, and Code is just confused about what's happening, and then the Uzuhiko launches, and even Ada's surprised. This was a fantastic chapter. I think the pacing was excellent, and I think I want that to continue. Maybe you disagree, maybe you wanted to slow down a little bit, be a little bit more methodical, but for me, I think the fast pacing is kind of keeping people involved.
I definitely agree. It's keeping everyone on their heels, considering how hype the time skip was. I mean, the first page of this series is essentially carrying the hype for people's anticipation to see on what's to come, right? Seeing Team Boruto, seeing Team Kawaki, and now that we're finally here, they're getting on with it. They're not wasting any time, and yeah, the pacing has been fast, but I do gotta say, they got there very quickly, right? They hit the nail in the coffin. Everything that we wanted, right, is here, right? We've seen how badass Boruto is. Now, of course, we can see other characters pop off, such as with Sarada and Kawaki. We really haven't seen them fight at full power yet.
Right.
But at least for somebody like Boruto, who is the main character, this is exactly what we all wanted, right? Boruto went away for 3 years. He's come back a completely different character, a total badass. He pulls out this jutsu, destroys Code with ease. After Code was talking all this tough shit, talking about like, I got a 10 tails army, I'm gonna pull up and destroy everything that Kawaki ever got. And now he got embarrassed. Like, Boruto just played with them. And mind you, Boruto was not at full power, didn't use his karma, didn't use Momoshiki. Momoshiki didn't come out. He may have the Jogan. If he does have access to that, he didn't use it, right? So Code has left, and I do gotta say, the only thing that I wouldn't say there's a criticism, but it just begs the question: what is Code gonna do for the rest of the series, right? Because every time he tries to do something, he utterly fails, right? And now he's more or less the laughing stock of the Boruto community amongst all of the characters. Code is, everybody's been saying it, he's a fraud, right? He talks this tough shit and he never backs it up. Every time he tries to do something, he utterly fails, and it's embarrassing, right? I kind of get frustrated because it's like Code talks all this stuff and doesn't deliver. And for a villain, amongst Naruto and even Boruto villains, I've never seen a villain get done dirty in the same way Code has. You know, there's nothing wrong with villains losing in the plot, but when you get embarrassed repeatedly over and over and over and over again, it just has me thinking, what is this character what is this character really going to do for the rest of the series? Yes, Code is incredibly powerful. He has clearly pushed the plot, but it's always been at the expense of him losing, right? And now that he's back at his base with his Ten Tails army, what is next for somebody like him? Right.
Well, I feel like with Code, right? I think the statement was loud and clear by Kishimoto when Boruto showed up and stepped on this dude's face. Okay. Now, I personally was trying to look past that. I'm like, okay, well, it wasn't really like a power feat thing, you know, so on and so forth. But I think that statement was pretty clear and definitive that Code is not really going to be taken seriously. You don't do that to someone who is you have plans for in the future in some kind of substantial way, and then like. Okay, Code has been taking L after L like the brother from Death Note. We've been saying this for a minute now, right? So now I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, the time skip is here, brand new landscape, new manga. I'm looking forward to some things, and then they just step on the brother's face. So yeah, I think Code, in terms of him being him, right, quote unquote, I don't think that's going to happen. But if we are talking about predictions for the future for the character and just the next chapter and beyond, I will say this. I spoke about this particular topic on a prior stream, but I do believe that Code could get a moment. I do think he could get a moment. I believe he might become the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. And in doing so, I think he could handle Boruto and Kawaki in particular, and I'll explain how this might happen, in some kind of climactic battle, but I think that's about as high as his ceiling will ever reach. Now, how do we get to that particular point? Well, we do know Boruto is trying to track down the location of the juvenile Ten Tails, and he's using Code to do it. Now, the cliffhanger, as we mentioned, of chapter 3 was Boruto placing the toads on Code, and now he knows the location of the Ten Tails, and it looks like he's heading there. With that being said, I do think Boruto's going to go there. Now, Kawaki's right there, so I think Kawaki may follow, and that's how you get Boruto and Kawaki in the Ten Tails dimension. I think Code is going to be extremely desperate, and I do think this is where he might take in the complete Ten Tails, maybe open up a bunch of belt marks appearing all over the place, and the clog rhymes just hop out. There's like thousands of them. They're overwhelmed, and they all come together to create like this one big giant entity, and then it's absorbed by one Code, and then he gets that power, and like Garlic Jr. from Dragon Ball Z, or how Momoshiki did Naruto and Sasuke, grabs him by the head, drags him around, beats him up for a little bit. Ultimately, I do think Code is going to reach his peak somewhere around, I don't know, the next few chapters, depending on how long this takes, because they're obviously setting up the Ten Tails to be the next big bad, the main villain, and I want to see how that manifests itself. But do you have any predictions for Code? Like, what do you think he's going to do in the very near future? Do you think his character is going to last any length of time beyond this chapter? Let me know what you think.
Well, here's the thing with Code, he does have that Uzuhiko still affecting his body. Boruto explained it that it's going to continue on a semi-permanent level, meaning that it will keep on spinning until Boruto rescinds it or he just dies, right? And I don't think Code is going to get killed right away by the Uzuhiko. He's still alive for a reason, and that, with that being said, he is still a threat, even though he may not be on the level of Boruto, and Kawaki may even be stronger than someone like him. There's a reason why he's still here, and I think that he will get a moment. I agree with you, but I don't think it will be a overarching moment where he's going to dominate the story and be an overarching villain for a very long time. I believe that his next moment where he will finally catch a W, so to say, would be something with the Ten Tails. You did mention that you think that he will become the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. In my opinion, I think that Code will try to fuse with the Ten Tails, sort of like how Momoshiki became Fusion Momoshiki with Kinshiki. He'll try to somehow, some way absorb its powers, and instead of becoming the Jinchuriki, him and the Ten Tails combine. Right now, this could backfire on Code, as Boruto explains in Code that these Ten Tails have been modified in a completely different way thanks to Code's claw marks. And with how Boruto has been talking about these Ten Tails, saying that this is going to bring a worst possible future for everyone, if Code and the Ten Tails fuse together, I do see a possibility for Code, as you mentioned, to essentially bully Boruto and Kawaki, since it does seem like Boruto may follow Code to the Ten Tails dimension, and most likely Kawaki will be there too. That being said, if Code does get to that power level and beats up Boruto and Kawaki, I believe the Ten Tails will eventually overtake Code. And this is where the Ten Tails will become a much bigger threat that Boruto has been warning Code about. I think that would be a cool way to go into this Ten Tails arc that we've been discussing for a while, that we've been discussing for the past month or so, and I think that would be the best way to really bring the Ten Tails as the main villain. Maybe this could overcome Code as well and take over Code's consciousness to create a completely brand new character. But either way, for someone like Code, I don't think he's down and out yet, but I think he will go for a knockout punch with Boruto and Kawaki, but ultimately will probably lose in the end. Because here's the thing with Code, I've been saying it for a while, he is a loser, right? That's like his theme. He has always come in second when it comes to being the vessel of Ishiki, just being behind with Boruto. Ada, he wanted to get with Ada, but Ada likes Kawaki. He's always been that second coming. He's never been that number one guy, and I feel like with Code, he will finally be that number one person, but eventually we'll take it for granted. And I think the Ten Tails is going to be that one thing that will overcome him, and then he will go out. But that isn't really a prediction for next chapter, but more or less the next 4 to 5 chapters. But I'm just projecting.
So what about? Okay, so we spoke a little bit about Code, and I think we were both in agreement that he needs to get like at least a moment. Like maybe we don't agree on how it happens. I love your idea, but I definitely think he needs a moment. But kind of moving on beyond Code as a character, maybe Boruto as a character, because he, like you mentioned, he's not using karma, and we think he might have the Jogan. I know a different continuity, but the anime part 1 ended off with the Jogan, so maybe he's not using that either, right? He seems to just be using like base and then stacking on top of that with jutsu, right? So do you think that maybe Boruto is a little apprehensive as it pertains to using the power of the Otsutsuki? At least what he can control, because his body has been transformed, so there's only so much he can manage. But maybe he doesn't want to use karma, similarly to how Naruto didn't want to rely on Kurama at the start of Shippuden. And then maybe from this point, we can branch off into Kashi and Koji, because I think they pretty much gave us a clue and a hint saying, yeah, he's back in the series, and what that could mean for Sasuke's fate as it pertains to like Boruto's masters. Like, why would Koji, if you think this is the case, train Boruto if Sasuke's there? Maybe we can have two. And also Boruto's power progression as it pertains to like maybe Sage Mode or something, summonings or something of the sort.
Yeah, like when it comes to Boruto, I think he realized how dangerous it is for him to use the karma, because even though he has progressed his karma, as we saw when he initially fought Code at the end of part 1, he immediately saw the risk in it, right? Momoshiki came out, almost killed Naruto, and we saw what happened. Boruto had to sacrifice himself, and now that he knows what he has to do with, such as reversing the effects of omnipotence, trying to stop Kawaki, trying to use the karma seal will only bring more danger with Momoshiki awakening, because at this point Boruto, I think we can agree Boruto is I'm gonna say the strongest character we've seen. Probably, maybe not stronger than Damon, but I'm gonna go as far as say he's probably stronger than Baryon Mode, Naruto, Ishiki, around that level. I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna say that. And I think if Boruto and base, if Momoshiki took over this version of Boruto, I don't think anyone could stop that, in my opinion, because you gotta remember, it's when Momoshiki takes over, it's Momoshiki plus Boruto plus the karma. These are all additive powers, and we saw what base Boruto could do. He ran through Code, right? He no-diffed him. He really didn't have to try that much. And even though the Uzuhiko is one of the strongest, if not his strongest jutsu that he's made so far, of course he could have other abilities that he has in his arsenal. If Momoshiki can have access to those powers, nobody's stopping that, right? Or maybe Kawaki can get to that level. Maybe Code, if he fuses or becomes a Ten Tails Jinchuriki, could get to that level. And Boruto must have realized that, right? So, as you mentioned, Boruto could have potentially learned Sage Mode through the time skip if Kashi and Koji's back in the story, since we've seen that Koji's toads are with Boruto. That would be a good way to avoid using the karma. I feel like the karma seal for Boruto is going to be a last ditch power up that he has to use, where when he's in a bind, he's going to have to use that power up or else he's going to die. Compared to something like Sage Mode that requires nature energy, you don't lose risk of just running out of chakra right away. With something like that, Boruto has to be more careful on how he fights because Momoshiki has proven to be a threat. Whenever Momoshiki takes over Boruto, he doesn't care who's in his way. He will always go for the kill, whether it's Naruto, whether it's Sasuke. He's shown it in the past in part 1, and I think Boruto has come to his senses that, yo, I just can't use my karma at will like that. So I think Boruto has become pretty reluctant in using the karma seal, and most likely will rely on other factors when it comes to fighting, right? We already seen him use Kenjutsu with the sword against Code, and I think Sage Mode is definitely a huge possibility because that will save him of just relying on the karma seal all the time, because when he was fighting his ops in part 1, he was constantly popping the karma without really taking in effect of the possible side effects, such as with Momoshiki. Boruto has now become a calm, cool, and collected character, and I think he's gonna have to really use his own abilities to get through. Of course, he's gonna have to use the karma eventually, but he's definitely become much more wary about Momoshiki coming up.
Yeah, it could be something like, in the anime at least, when Sasuke was having a conversation with Naruto on top of the Hokage building. This was like post Ishiki battle. Kurama had just died, right? Sasuke was like, listen, you're not him anymore, okay? You're not that dude. You're not the guy. Like, Kurama's gone, and you need to come to terms with that. You keep making all these bold declarations about what you will do if Momoshiki takes over, and I think even Gaara checked him on this as well. It's about your level of power currently, right? So it could be the case where Sasuke saw in Boruto's father a certain kind of like reliance on great power, and once that power was gone or taken away, then Naruto was potentially a shell of himself, but definitely something less than in terms of his power. So maybe he wants to say, hey, look, Boruto, I know you have this great power, and to a certain extent you can't help but use some of it because your body has been infected, but we need to build you up as a shinobi, right? Don't just rely on Momoshiki all the time. Like, you need to be a great shinobi. And I think that gets back to what Sasuke told Boruto at the beginning of the series, where he told him, at this rate you'll never be able to surpass him, right? I think this was around the time where Sasuke and Boruto first met, when Boruto was asking to become his student or dialogue of the sort. I think it's really interesting, but since we're talking about Sasuke, let me know, yes or no, do you think Sasuke is dead, or will he be dying in the very near future?
I don't think Sasuke is dead currently, but I do think Sasuke is incapacitated somewhere. I've seen people discuss this, and at first I didn't want to believe it, but after reading this chapter and like started describing how like the clawgrams work, I think somehow, some way that a clawgram has bitten Sasuke. Sasuke is turned into a tree. He's not dead, of course, as Sarada explained it. When one of the fighter ninjas got bit by the clawgrams, he was still breathing, he was still alive, and since we know the clawgrams are instinctively biting anyone, thinking that it's an Otsutsuki to become a god tree, I think this is what happened when Boruto fought Code during the time skip that we haven't seen yet. When they fought each other off screen, I do think Sasuke was with them, and this is how Boruto has Sasuke's outfit, and I think this is how he got it from him, Sasuke being incapacitated. I don't think he's dead. I think he's still alive, and I definitely do think Boruto will save him, but I still think Sasuke is gonna go eventually. The one thing that Momoshiki has told Boruto is Momoshiki is waiting for Boruto to break. That was his goal with the whole omnipotence shit. When the omnipotence occurred, Momoshiki was waiting for Boruto just to lose it, to break down, and when Boruto realized like what happened to him, he didn't care. He's saying, you know, I'm Boruto Uzumaki, I'm the son of the Hokage. With that being said, Momoshiki immediately got frustrated. With a character like that that's still lurking, I still think Sasuke's gonna come back. He's gonna play a massive role in the story, but in order for Boruto to kind of go through what Momoshiki was talking about breaking down, Sasuke's gonna have to go eventually, right? Naruto's out of the story. He's not coming back anytime soon. So for a character like Sasuke, he's already been through so much when it comes to fighting opponents like Jigen and Ishiki, where honestly he should have died, but you know, thanks to plot and having the ability to escape thanks to his Rinnegan, he's always managed to survive, but he doesn't have that power anymore. And now we're getting into characters that are way beyond anything that we've dreamed of just Naruto and Sasuke. I don't think Sasuke is gonna be able to stick with the top guns. Of course, that doesn't mean I'm saying Sasuke is weak, but with Boruto, Kawaki, Code, and the Ten Tails, it's only gonna get more dangerous, and he might get chopped off just for the sake of Boruto.
When you look at like fiction in its totality, reality, certain places here and there, masters almost always die. Spoiler alert, but no spoiler alert because it's been out since the 80s. But, you know, Grandmaster Yoda, right, from Star Wars, right? That's a character. Jiraiya in our own series of Naruto. Sometimes they live, but most times they do die to boost the development and the and so forth for the character that they were training at the time. So that could be really interesting when it comes to like Sasuke as a master. And I like the idea, their version of putting Sasuke on the shelf, like how they did with Naruto, just having like packed up on the tree like a Christmas ornament. That'd be funny. I like the concept a lot. And for me, I think I would agree. He's not dead. Oh, no, come on. We can't do that to Sasuke.
You can't kill him off screen. They kill him off screen.
Right.
That would be so trash. if they did that, I would have rioted, bro.
I think they've been hinting and like kind of like pushing us in that direction, but they need to pay that off on panel for sure.
Exactly.
But in the future, I think it might happen. Okay, so with that covered, I do want to ask you a few questions just really quickly. How about Amato? What do you think Amato's up to? Where do you think he is? We haven't seen him in the first 3 chapters. He's a highly important character. Is he affected by omnipotence? We know he wanted Kawaki for his daughter, his stated motivations. What do you think about Amato?
It's kind of weird because what we've seen of Amato, he's just a human, right? The only thing that I could really say is that he's been modified a little bit. When he first came to the village and was taken under security by Naruto and Shikamaru, he kind of displayed that he has been modified a little bit, even though he is human. Now, with that being said, if he was affected by omnipotence, he would want Boruto to implant a karma onto a cyborg to bring his daughter back. That being said, if that's the case, Amato probably would have left the village by now looking for Boruto to implant a karma onto a cyborg to bring his daughter back. Now, that would be kind of weird because they probably would have mentioned it by now since it's already been 3 chapters. Yes, the time skip just began, but the fact that we haven't seen Amato yet is raising some concerns. However, if he isn't affected by omnipotence, that would be crazy. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he wasn't, because he's the one who's modified all of Kara and all of the cyborgs. He has information on all of the Otsutsuki. He knows everything about karma. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he wasn't, but it's kind of weird with him because it can go either way, right? He could be affected, he may have not been, and even if he was, he probably would have stayed in the village regardless, because at least from what we've seen from him, he's not really a fighter who knows a lot about the story.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. If he's genuinely affected by omnipotence, then yeah, he would view Boruto as Kawaki. He needs Kawaki and his karma because the data of his daughter is in Kawaki's karma specifically. So he would want to use that to revive his daughter. So he says. I guess I'll take his word for it for now. So yeah, he may have tried to like leave Konoha, but we do know he do that without permission. So that might cause some kind of conflict and he might end up in the gulag for all I know. I don't know. He might be in between a rock and a hard place right now. But moving on from Amato, which is, we talk about Kibi Sanzu and the potential of like an Otsutsuki villain from that. But moving on from Amato, what do you think about Damon, right? Damon was able to feel the earth shake and it seems like no one else was. And he understood about planetary rotation when Ada herself, remember she has the Senrigan, she's supposed to be all knowing via that ability, herself didn't even know. So it seems like they're separating Damon and Ada to a certain degree and giving him some kind of autonomy rather for the first time. I feel like, yes, they're separate characters, but this is the first time I feel like Damon is a little bit, he knows something she doesn't, and the implications of that could be major, right? Some Shibai Otsutsuki shenanigans at play. But what do you think about Damon? Is there anything there?
Well, with Damon, he is a fighter first, right? Every time he looks at somebody, he is always looking to scrap. When he first saw Himawari, he immediately tried to fight her right away. And same thing with Boruto, Kawaki, and Code. I think he was just impressed by the power. Damon was able to differentiate the Rasengan Uzuhiko compared to Ada, who, despite being the all-knowing, she kind of downplayed the jutsu. She called it basic, whereas with Damon was immediately impressed. Damon and Ada are completely different when it comes to being in battle. Damon is always looking to fight people, whereas with Ada, she has stated that she doesn't like to fight, she doesn't like seeing the sight of blood, and she only knows basic taijutsu. So I think that shows you that Damon is looking forward to maybe fighting Boruto in the future, or possibly Code as well. As we mentioned before, if he does become the Ten Tails Jinchuriki or fuses with that being.
Yeah, do you think Damon has the ability to tap into planetary rotation as well?
I don't really know, because at least from what we've seen of Damon, it's mostly flexion and with how fast he is. We just have to wait and see until we see Damon's full arsenal, because at least from what we have seen before, Damon almost spilled all of his abilities to Code, but Ada wanted to keep it a secret. So we haven't seen Damon at full power. There could be a possibility that where Damon has the ability to use planetary rotation in some of his attacks, but we're just gonna have to wait and see until he fights at full power. But I got a question for you. They did, with Himawari, with how Damon went up to Himawari and was talking about her power, now that we know know that she's been training as a shinobi in the time skip. What role do you think she's gonna play in the future? Because she was the cover of this chapter. We know that she was training with Team 10, and Damon kind of hyped her up in terms of power. What role do you think she's gonna have in the future of this series?
When Two Blue Vortex started, we kind of got her motivations, right, for the first time, and it seems like she wants to protect who she believes is Kawaki. Remember, she's still affected by omnipotence, and she wants to get strong enough to protect Boruto. So that kind of gives you an idea about what she wants to do. She is not like the Avenger, right? She's the protector. She's like the guardian. So that's a good and noble kind of archetype to adopt. And then also she wants to get strong to do that, right? So she's training with Chocho, but it's super interesting because then you get an understanding about her dynamic with Kawaki, who she believes to be her biological brother via omnipotence. One would imagine if she's trying to get strong, she would be training with the strongest guy around, right? Probably not Damon, because I do think it is Damon, but her brother, right? And even in the anime, different continuity to be sure, but she was trying to get Boruto to teach her some things and train with in the anime. So I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that she would have gone to Kawaki. But we did see that later on in subsequent chapters, Kawaki does not like being called big brother, and he's not really leaning into being her brother. So there's clearly that coldness, that distance there. But nevertheless, she wants to gain power to be like the defender, the guardian of, well, definitely Boruto, but probably others as the story progresses. So I think that's going to be her goal, the protector, the guardian. But I do think she borrows concepts, or she kind of parallels a character like a Son Gohan from Dragon Ball Z, as I'm sure a lot of people has mentioned at this point, to where she's like a reluctant warrior, right? But she does have this hidden power that made Damon sweat for a bit. And even though he's sensing planetary rotations and the shaking of the earth and Rasengan Uzuhiko shenanigans, Damon himself smirked and called it nifty. Meanwhile, 3 years prior, he's like surprised and shook a little bit by the hidden potential of like little baby Hima. So it kind of speaks to like maybe Himawari 3 years ago was putting out higher levels of power as it pertains to her hidden strength than Uzuhiko was, which is insane. I don't know how I feel about that. And Boruto was holding back and he was in base, but it's super interesting. So all of that being said, I think Himawari is going to be trained probably by Boruto, or maybe even by Sasuke, because I do theorize that Boruto will fail to stop the Ten Tails, and I do think he's going to gather up certain people and they're all going to go and train together, and I think Himawari is going to be one of those people. And I think as a result, for a while we'll see her kind of in the middle of the pack, right? Nothing really major. There'll be hints and clues when things get dire, like Gohan, where she'll turn up and then we'll see a brief flash of greatness, but it'll simmer down as quickly as it rose, and then at some indefinite point she might just be the answer that we're all looking for. So she could be that wild card that Kishimoto kind of taps into when we actually need it, right? Goku was the main character of Dragon Ball, but ultimately Gohan finished off the main villain of the Cell saga, being Cell himself. So I could definitely foresee something like that with her. And then you also have to take into consideration her mindset, right? The lock on Byakugan mode and what that means, and if that's tied to her hidden power, and that could have something to do with Otsutsuki shenanigans. People play around with the idea of Kaguya. I think it's interesting, but we'll have to wait and see for Himawari. There's a lot of characters like that, man, like Sumire and the Nue stuff, right? It's explored more in the anime, more so than the manga, but that is linked to the Gozu Tenno seal, which is linked to Kaguya. So what's going on with that? And we know Nue can push Boruto's Jogan power progression and evolution. What's going on with that? Where's Toneri Otsutsuki on the moon? Is the brother even still up there? I do not know. What is Orochimaru doing, and where is Mitsuki?
Facts.
There's a lot of stuff there, man. There's a
They
lot of
show
stuff.
me in this chapter.
Yeah, people are like, oh, Mello, where's Mitsuki? I'm like, brother, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he took the long way. He wanted to pack up Boruto. I'm sure he's on his way. We'll have to see. But before we wrap up the video, give me your current top 5, a little bit of power scaling. We know people are going to be asking about it. Meek's top 5 strongest characters right now who are alive.
Number 1 gotta be Damon, of course. Number 2, Boruto. Number 3, Code. Number 4, Kawaki. And 5, throw a curveball, I'm gonna put Sarada at number 5.
Oh,
That's my top
okay.
5 right there.
You got Code over Kawaki.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. We haven't seen much from Kawaki, to be fair. So
Yeah, it's hard to say. I see both of them on a similar power level.
I think our lists are pretty much the same. I would say I have Damon number 1. I think that's pretty self-evident. I think they doubled down with the whole him knowing about the planetary rotation stuff and him just saying it's nifty. That's insane. So Damon's number 1, Boruto's number 2. I think I'm going to give Code number 3 as well. Code, he tanked that Uzuhiko. He ate that. He's still walking around, stumbling like he's drunk, but walking nevertheless. So I'll give the brother number 3. Kawaki, I'll give him number 4. I'll show a little respect to the boy. And then number 5, I'm going to give it to Sasuke Uchiha. I think I'm going to give it to Sasuke. I'm not sure. Look, I want Sarada to be her, and I think she will be for sure with the Mangekyo shenanigans and whatever external power she gets. But ultimately, I think I'm going to give her a little bit more time to cook. And I think Sasuke right now is probably the strongest, or maybe a wild card will be Delta, but we'll have to see.
Okay.
So that has been our review of Boruto Two Blue Vortex Chapter 3. Now, I'm your humble host, Mello. That's It's Meek. And together we are Peak Fiction. Guys, make sure you subscribe, like the content, hit that bell icon so that you won't miss out when we drop dope content like this. And we'll check you guys on the next video. With that being said, later.